Crusader Kings 3 is a detailed, ambitious game. One can create all sorts of medieval adventures in its sandbox, from building up grand castles to becoming a king to even eating the Pope. To do any of that though, players must first master a sometimes cumbersome interface. Compared with CK2's tutorial, which often raised more questions than answers for new players, CK3's tutorial is a treat. There are clear explanations of many of the game's important concepts and mechanics. Nevertheless, new players may still miss out on a lot of the control interface's details, including some key elements that aren't mentioned in detail in the tutorial at all. Sometimes, when I'm blathering along, streaming CK3 over at twitch.tv/resorty, link in the description, viewers ask me what mod allowed me to do something I've just done. As I don't ever play with mods, however, these game interactions are always available to them too, though often not in obvious ways. This video explores 10 such interactions, some of which are very important, some which are very fun, and all of which are hidden in plain sight. We're going to call this one 10 things the game really could have taught you and you really could have found by clicking around, but who has time for that, really? Number 1 is going to be the outliner. How great would it be to know what your various holdings are doing without having to click onto every single one of them? How fantastic would you feel if you could jump from one army on one continent to an army on another continent without having to scroll all the way over across the world? Let me introduce you to the outliner. This handy overlay gives you access to all of your armies and also to your holdings. By double-clicking on any of the armies, you can bounce right to them, no matter where they are in the world, as long as they're not currently in combat. You can also use the overlay to see where exactly your rally point is bringing in troops. If you hit the raise army button there, it'll show up as a third army and gradually start reinforcing. You can then worry about other problems elsewhere in the world and constantly check out how many people are coming, being ready to move when there's sufficient number for yourself. On the main holdings, you can see where new buildings are being built and exactly how much time is left until they're completed, the blue line filling up the red entirely. With this information, you can ensure that your constructing peasants never ever get any time off. The third element of the outliner appear pinned characters, allows you to choose any character of importance and put them onto the pin mark permanently. Here you can list people who are alive or dead, prince or pauper, marriage or assassination target. Literally anyone who's ever been in the game world can be listed here for easy access. Generally speaking, the outliner distills down much of the game's inordinate complexity, those matters you definitely do care about. While we're fiddling around with character pages, I want to point out another easily overlooked button. Number 2, the Barbershop. Does your ruler deserve a permanent reward for having captured the Holy Roman Emperor? Done. Can your king only get into the mood if he's thinking about the Holy Land? Has your bishop been a very naughty boy who should think about all the prestige he's lost you? The Barbershop can be found as a right-click interaction right there, though only on characters that are in your ruler's court. You can play dress-up on the characters to your heart's content, modifying basically every part of their appearance. Though any changes you make are absolutely sticky, they'll persist on the character, where they end up on your court, in prison, or even in death. Some of the cosmetic items, like the page boy haircut down here at the bottom, and the chaperone, which our characters were already wearing right there, were only available in the Crusader Kings 2 Monarch Journey quests, and now they're in fact unavailable to any new players. If prior Paradox patterns are followed, however, they'll likely become available in future content patches, and presumably DLCs and modding make many other fashionable outfits for your characters available soon. Be warned though, whatever clothes your ruler's wearing upon death are theirs, permanently. What a shame or a treat it'd be to have your proud ruler appearing as a stable boy for all of time. Easy as 1, 2, 3, it's education focus. Suppose little Bobby Firstborn here is causing all kinds of trouble for you. He's convinced himself that he's a great philosopher and is now going on telling all of your vassals that all legitimate political authority arises from the consent of the governed. To rein him on in, you need to tell his teachers to teach him something, anything else. The way you do that is with this interaction right here, namely the Education Focus button. This button, which is first available at the age of 6 on a child, shows all 5 of the possible education focuses in the game, with green pointers indicating those the child are likely good at and red indicating the opposite. This determination of goodness and not so goodness is based entirely on what traits the character has. In this case, Bobby is currently rowdy, which gives a bonus to both intrigue and martial. As such, he'd probably do well with the Xena warrior cries and with the shanking, though his wild energy makes it very difficult sitting to read books. Left alone, the AI will consistently choose educational focus for your kids that match their traits well. You can of course choose against type if you'd like to, having your heir study diplomacy even if they're a stuttering recluse. It might actually work out. As with so much else in CK though, the best educational focus for your kids depends on what else is happening in the game at that moment, what you're going to imagine you want your next child to be good at when they're eventually ruler. Maybe you'll even wind up needing a philosopher king after all. In the coming weeks, I'll put together a video that covers the details of CK's education system. From guardians to trait selection, there's a lot of depth there. While we're talking kids though, let's talk keeping them alive. Number 4 is forbidding the heir from combat. When it comes to finding able-bodied and competent knights to serve your empire, the AI ignores the adjectives entirely. If a character exists in your realm and is legally allowed to fight, the AI will queue them up to march right on into war. As better fighting characters die off, lower prowess characters take over, until eventually your army is nothing more than children wielding foam swords and Nerf bats. To help you save your kids and valued counselors from the AI's Charnel House Call, let me introduce you to the Knight interface, available in the military page right here. On this page you'll find a roster of your finest knights ordered by their prowess, their personal combat skill. From here you can scroll down and find your heir and then forbid them from battle, substantially increasing their chances of not dying young. As a whole generation of their young countrymen march off to die in yet another pointless holy war, you can claim they have, I don't know, bone spurs or something. Alternatively, if there's a character whose lifespan you wish to drastically shorten, you can force them into battle, especially those characters who are not especially good at combat. They will likely die on the battlefield. So if someone's been rude to you, someone doesn't like you, force them into combat. Having micromanaged our heir, now it's time to micromanage our realm. Number 5 is renaming titles. Suppose you've spent a while building up your Empire of Britannia, but don't really want to be British anymore. You figured that 1376 is as good a time for revolution as 1776, so you start calling yourself Americans. Why won't the game respect your self-identification? To make it so, you just need to work your way over to the Title Name Change button right up here, rename title. By clicking that, you can change your name to anything you want to and set your way to USA, USA-ing all over the map. More seriously, this interaction can be used to ensure an important title continues as your main title's name, especially when you create a subsequent de jure kingdom with an uninteresting name. If, for example, in the tutorial you wanted, you could change the Kingdom of Ireland right on over to the name Munster instead, taking seriously the heritage from which you came. What's the adjective Munster? Munster-in? Or, you know, you can call London Cool Guyville instead of the Earldom of Awesome Town, or even use your county names to promote important content. Basically, any title or holding in your entire realm can be renamed. All you have to do is go to the title's insignia. It takes you then to the title page right here. Then click on the quill up top and you can change the name however you'd like to. While we're here, let's talk about another easily missed button. It's number 6, the title history. The title history button is the little book up here on top of the title page, and it's available on every title in the entire game. When you click on it, you get a list of all of the holders of the title, in this case the Earldom of Resorty, sorry Kent, all the rulers all the way back since the very beginning of known history, well back before the game even began. This speaks in some ways to how absolutely wonderful Paradox's research team is. On this page, along with a list of rulers and how they died, if it's known, when they died, etc., you can see how exactly the title moved from one person to another. In many cases, this is just inheritance, a father giving the title over to a son over and over again. But here we see, for example, that William the Conqueror came by and conquered this county, and then granted it to one of his eventual vassals, Duke Hugh. Despite all this detail, it's sometimes not possible to figure out exactly what happened when you find a random county randomly moving hands from one person to another, but usually you can get some better idea by reading through. Also, one missing element is who the liege of this earldom is. It of course moved from the King of England to William the Conqueror here, but sometimes it bounces around through inheritance in ways that are hard to follow. One can think of the title history page as providing a stable record of the game world's often chaotic reshaping. While we're talking about the title page, let's move to number 7, title interactions. New players to Crusader Kings 3 are sometimes aware that titles can be destroyed, created, and stolen from one's neighbors. To do this, simply look at the bottom of any title page, where you see little buttons like this one, Destroy Title There. Creating titles can help one to better organize vassals. If you find yourself a little bit over the vassal cap, one way of addressing that is going to be to create duchies to give counts to, and kingdoms to give your dukes to. That'll help you to keep your vassals better in line, which will then avoid the penalty for being over vassals, which is a substantial hit to both your taxes and levies from your personal domain. Beyond that, creating new titles can give access to de jure CBs. If a lower tier county should report to a higher tier duchy that you hold, you have a good reason to fight to take control of it. Also, you do get a substantial amount of monthly prestige for every single one of your held titles. Destroying titles can be useful for fixing succession issues. In the case of every form of succession other than Confederate partition, if a title does not exist, it cannot be passed on. So once you move out of CP into anything else, destroy titles that would break off from your realm at the ruler's death. Beyond that, destroying titles can also be used to avoid the too many duchies penalty. In the case of this ruler right here, we'll see that he has 22 personal titles, of which more than a few of them are duchies. Pull up one of his vassals, we notice they are less than fully pleased with them, I do believe. Yep, right here we see a negative 45 penalty for having too many duchies. Destroying some of those duchies would ensure that this penalty goes away and keep the vassals a little happier. Beyond that, destroying titles also lets you avoid vassals who are angry and want things that you have. If you don't have a title anymore that they want, they cannot ask for it. What does not exist may not be coveted. There are requirements to creating and destroying any titles at all. In case you're of the Kingdom of Egypt, it costs 300 gold to do so and give you some prestige. On the other side, destroying titles will cost you prestige because you're no longer quite as wonderful as you once were. Also upset anyone who should de jure report to that title. So if you're destroying, in this case, the Empire of Britannia, then the King of Wales, the King of Ireland, etc. will all be very, very angry for a very long time. Usurping titles, which is taking titles that belong to other people already, is a fairly complicated mechanic and requires one to think about religion and cultures at play. That will be another video detailing how best to think about tile page interactions coming pretty soon. For now, number 8, moving the capital. Many CK3 playthroughs involve the player beginning with a small area of land and gradually taking over more and more improved set of holdings. How strange it would be then to keep your capital in a small backwater outpost when your troops have recently captured a larger and far better one. In this kind of case, you have access to what's called the Move Capital button. You see it right here. When evaluating where your capital should be, you should think about what buildings are already built, as well as what special buildings the holding includes or could include. In the case of the William the Conqueror start, London's an obvious new capital after winning the invasion, because London has access to both a duchy building as well as a special building, the Tower of London. There are limitations, though, to the move your capital interaction. Number one, you have to be at peace when doing so. Imagine moving a U-Haul truck full of your things across the channel in the middle of a war. Number two, you can only do so once in a lifetime. And beyond that, the shift causes you to move somewhere where your culture may not be the same as local populace. This is both a difficulty as well as a positive, because by going somewhere with a different culture, your ruler has the opportunity to change, convert to that local culture. For 300 prestige, you can shift to the capital's culture. This can be used to convert to a culture that's more popular with your vassals than your current one. It can also be used to get ahead in innovations. When you change cultures, you move from the Irish culture to instead the Welsh one. The innovations that are occurring shift as well. We come then to number 9, various army buttons. The tutorial teaches players how to move their armies into harm's way and not much past that. It doesn't give much details of how they may be controlled or interacted with on a more general level. So a few quick words about army interactions. As the game goes along, you'll find yourself with an increasingly large pile of ordinary cannon fodder, your peasants with pitchforks perhaps, and then a number of well-trained knights and specialized men at arms. Many people have asked me, how does one go about raising only those levies, those disposable peasants, instead of also threatening to use your knights and men at arms? Unfortunately, there's no way to do so right now. Instead, you have to raise the majority of the stack and then use the split-off new army to select out the levies, leaving you with just simple soldiers and not any of the men at arms at all. You can select that army and use it in disposable ways. The split-off button can be used for other purposes as well. For example, in CK3, siege weapons like trebuchets, onagers, and bombards are absolutely useless in anything other than siege warfare. So if you create a second army, which is for your siege weapons, you can use it to attack enemy holdings while your main army goes and fights in melee. If you're going to do that, definitely you should have a different commander on the siege army from the commander on the main army. You can change commanders with, here's another secret little button, this recycling icon here. Choosing a new commander, especially one who has the military engineer perk right here, that will then have faster sieging. You can change commanders based on what you're trying to do in a battle at a time. For example, the person with a supply duration increase can be useful if you're going far from home. Beyond that, there are many other beneficial perks. Having good defense, for instance, when fighting against a stronger force, or being able to cross rivers without taking penalty. The split army button can also be used for one other purpose. Earlier I told you that you could send troublesome vassals into combat by forcing them to take on a knight role. After doing that, you can then scroll down and find the vassal causing you a problem and put them into an army of one. Then selecting that army, you can make them the commander of that if you want to, and march them off into almost certain doom. And that way the vassal will go away, no longer causing you any problems at all. While we're talking about armies, holy cow, it's a bonus tip! Number 9.5, moving the army before a full stack. This is one of those tips I'm actually not quite sure why Paradox is not included in the tutorial. We see our army being deployed to a rally flag here. You understand it takes many months for them to gather from all around the realm, in this case 8 whole months. What if you don't want to wait that long though? What if you're interested in shifting this army into combat right away with who's there right now? You can do this by selecting the army, holding down your control key, and clicking where you want to go. This will actually stop their rallying and send the troops off to march immediately. And then finally, number 10, mass prison interactions. By the late game, you'll often find that your prison's completely overflowing with enemies. In this case, in the year 1333, we have 38 prisoners inside of our king's prison. We could go through every one of these characters, keeping a close eye on which of them have interesting claims, which of them are good soldiers, which of them we can get hooks on, but all of those take so much time to do. As such, if you don't want to spend the time reading through everybody, at the bottom here there are 3 mass action buttons: mass ransom, mass release, and mass execute. As far as mass ransom goes, it doesn't work as well as one would like. It does not only ransom people from whom you can get all possible money. 6 characters can be ransomed here. Some of them will be people you can get full money from, some a little bit of money. People are only ransomed though for cash, not for hooks. The mass release button does not allow you to choose the conditions of release, whether changing their religion, getting hooks against them, recruiting the court. Instead, it just lets them go free in one mighty act of mercy. Finally, feeling less than merciful, the button on the far right, the mass execute button, will make you a big hit at everyone's family parties except for the people you are executing. A great tool for Vikings, though, who will get bonus piety for their executions, potentially sinful, and also very likely to upset the family of all these people, as it says right there. So there you have it. 10 things the game really could have taught you, and you really could have found out by clicking around, but who has time for that, really? I hope they helped. If you enjoyed it, feel free to comment, like down below. I'd appreciate it. Now, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.